shoot. Back. Sorry, we go back. Oh, one sec. All right. Hi, this is Aaron Howitt. This is my academic journey through HCS 392. So, where do we begin? This painting, which is the Woman in Algiers painting. This is one of the first times I really engaged in the class. This is like day 2 or 3, I believe, when we were first starting to talk about Richard Burton's Aladdin. And in this presentation, in I in that class in that specific day, we were talking about the idea of Orientalism and the kind of ideas around, what does this painting invoke for the ideas of colonialism? And so something that we, came up with is that these women look bored, that they look potentially unhappy with their lives, and that for colonialism, we must, one of the main things that was said was, we must save the brown woman from the brown man. That is one of the main points of Orientalism, and it's on display here. But what I thought and what I pointed out in that class was the woman on the right, who looks to have been a servant. She is the one that looks the most able and willing to talk, the most vocal in this scenario based on her position in the room. But she's pushed off to the side. She is almost going out of frame, and this is a very big kind of idea that I had, that there's something more going on in this painting. And I kind of want to use this painting as my focus, my way of going through the rest of this presentation to say there is always more going on. There's always things that are happening behind the scenes, behind every story. There is more to be seen and learned. So, with that in mind, let's move on to the next topic. Richard Burton's Aladdin. So, here we have a lot of this is one of the main starting points of Orientalism. Richard Burton poorly translated 1001 Arabian Nights and included his own story of Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, or Aladdin. And so this is where we originally get the story, and it's one of the main sort of talking points of Orientalism. He wrote this to inspire, noblemen and lords of Britain and Western culture to basically say, hey, let's go here, and these are all the reasons why. And so one of the couple of those reasons is, again, the idea of save the brown woman from the brown man. But we also see within Aladdin, it's not this specific quote. This specific quote is related to the idea of save the brown woman from the brown man. But one of the ideas is that another idea of colonialism, Orientalism, is that these places are not civilized enough. That's another one. Is that they are not civilized enough. They do not have, properly functioning cities, or they don't live like we do, and that's a problem. That's another main point of Orientalism. And third one is resource collection, which is a big thing in colonialism and just colonialist ideas in general, is this idea of resource collection. We and in this story, it is shown that there is wealth beyond imagination that the Sultan Aladdin and others of the Sultan Aladdin have no idea what to do with, because there's just so much wealth. And so now that's strike three. That's another reason for getting to go and colonize the Middle East. Colonize all these different territories for Great Britain, because wow, they just have so many resources that we can use. So yeah, so now, but how does this relate to? I mean, this is also another. This Orientalism also ties back to the painting, because that is the same time period. That is the same time period that we get this painting. So what is really the main, how does this connect into this class? Well, to talk about that, we have to talk about Disney's Aladdin. Yes, Disney's Aladdin. That was the week after Aladdin. We had to compare. So what is there to compare? The opening song is no different than most of the rhetoric in Aladdin, than Richard Burton's Aladdin. The opening song to Disney's Aladdin has the exact same rhetoric. It's very small. It's right at the beginning, but it is the exact same rhetoric. Why would that be the case? So we are a century removed from over a century removed from Richard Burton, when Disney made Aladdin. The opening song says, "Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place, where the caravan camels roam, where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but it's home." We are once again showing that this place is not fully civilized. That there is that it's barbaric. That there is not any kind of culture. Well, there is culture, but there's not like civil culture, in the sense that any kind of Western culture could be. And so, what must we do? We must go and civilize them. Another thing that is taken from Richard Burton is the idea that there is no female agency in either story. There is no female agency within either story. Going back to the quote of this quote, we are seeing that the equivalent of Princess Jasmine within Richard Burton's Aladdin, Lady Badr al-Budur, I believe I said that right. She is essentially kidnapped by Aladdin in the story, and does nothing. The sword is right there between them. He doesn't touch it, but she also does not touch the sword. There is, and yes, you can say it says there she's scared, she's distraught. But we are now perpetuating the idea of saving the brown woman from the brown man in this way. And so, when we come to Disney's Aladdin, Jasmine does not have female agency. Yes, she may deny suitors. Yes, that may be seen as a form of agency for Jasmine. But when it comes to the actual grandstand of the movie, she is kidnapped. She's captured Oh, she tries to help Aladdin, you know, by distracting Jafar. How does she do that? She has to sexualize herself in a way that is, to distract Jafar. She has to sexualize herself to distract Jafar, and it still doesn't work because Aladdin has to save the day. The man has to save the day. That is the female agency. And what do we think of Aladdin? Well, in this story, he is what is called the noble savage. He is deemed as a worthy person by the narrative, but in the context of colonialism, he is not civilized still. He is a vagrant. He is, there's an entire song about him being a street rat, essentially. To quote from Burton, he's a scapegrace. He is essentially a nobody until until he becomes, as the movie says, the diamond in the rough. And that is some of the ideas of Aladdin. And so together they both have this they both have this Orientalist outlook. Not only that, again, century removed, the audience may have changed, but the message is relatively the same. We look, Richard Burton wrote Aladdin as a way to sort of continue colonialism into the Middle East. Disney's Aladdin is written for children to be enjoyed by children. Why are the messages still the same? That is what I ask. Why are the messages still the same? Why are we still invoking this idea of a lack of female agency? Why are we still invoking this idea of barbarism into the Middle East? Why are we still talking about how the Middle East needs to be civilized? And this isn't like Disney's Aladdin wasn't that written that far away either. Disney's Aladdin came out in 1992. A little over 30 years ago. That's not that far away. For things to be said like that, it's not that far away, which is very unfortunate. And so, but for now, I'll move on. I'll get back to Aladdin, and I forgot to put the E in Aladdin here, but I'll get back to Aladdin and Disney's Aladdin in a second. Let's move on to our next topic. Hamlet. Yes, I did put the full monologue here and then repeat to be or to not to be. But this is the main takeaway from this class, is this idea of to be or not to be. I'll discuss the frail hero in a second. It relates to Hyder, but I want to discuss to be or not to be and the monologue. We are given this grand idea of what Shakespeare, it's a great story. But it's timeless. Why is it timeless? It is because of to be or not to be. Why do we still talk about Hamlet? Because of to be or not to be. This monologue, this idea of what are my choices and shall I die by my choices? That is the grand idea of to be or not to be. That is Hamlet's idea of to be or not to be, because to be or not to be is individualized to the specific person and a specific kind of idea, conflict that they are, talking about. And there is no greater representation of this sort of grand idea of what to be or not to be can be about than Hydir. Hydir, directed by I feel really bad. Vishal Bhardwaj. I hopefully pronounced that correctly. This is his entire monologue. I was able to get this in English. Um, but we're talking about the Kashmir conflict. That the idea of a group of people, the Kashmiris, who are essentially forgotten about by the Indian government. That their lives, that they're restricted to these camps, to these specific places where they are monitored, where they are under this sovereign state that does not care about them. And so here we go. We have this monologue, this idea of, where do we belong, and where am I? Where do I belong within this conflict, within my people, within this state, within the sovereign state? And this is what really gets to me, because we move on from just Hamlet talking about, you know, should he kill or should he, suffer under his uncle. We are now talking about where am I or where am I not? Where is Kashmir or where is Kashmir not? And it's this idea, this specific monologue, soliloquy, that kind of embodies this this narrative of to be or not to be. This is one of the main reasons why we still talk about to be or not to be. You know? And so Hydir does something great in the fact that we are now giving female agency. Hydir's mother. I'm blanking on her name. Hydir's mother uses her body as a way of demonstrating what she believes in and what she believes will uh, continue her idea of to be or not to be. She uses body politics to give herself meaning, and to give her body meaning, and to use her body in a way that is meaningful to her and her idea of to be or not to be. No one else can use her body, just her. That is the agency that Aladdin and Aladdin is missing. That is the agency that makes Hydir so important. And so when we look at them both together, yes, we were talking about death and the politics about death. Yes, we were talking about body politics, necropolitics. Yes, we were talking about it. But it goes so much deeper than that. We are talking about the individual experience of to be or not to be. We were talking about the individual experience of Hydir. Where am I and where am I not? Where is Kashmir and where is Kashmir not? And so it is in this kind of, idea of looking at it all together, those four, Aladdin, saying the wrong word, Aladdin and Aladdin, Hamlet and Hydir. What is what is really going on? What is really going on for these two to have this this grand narrative, this grand idea to either influence one way or another how we think about the Middle East, or in Hamlet and Hyder, how we think about ourselves and the conflicts that we are a part of. Hyder wants what's best for Kashmir, And so to do that, he is now wrestling with himself of what part does he have to play in Kashmir's road to freedom. And so now we will move on to the other dangers of the sovereign state, as proposed by Taxi, by Jafar Panahi, Jafar Panahi. That I do know how to say. Jafar Panahi. So, so Taxi. Oh, I need some water. Hold on. Oh, where did I put my water bottle? Right here. All right, I just need a little water. All right, Jafar Panahi, Taxi. What is the grand idea here that I am getting at, and what is my engagement in this? Well, Taxi. I didn't put a quote here specifically because I'm going to mention a broad range of stuff from Taxi, pretty much the whole movie. The movie is about stories, and these stories are actually reflected in the different people seen here on the movie poster, which is why I really like this movie poster. But these stories, specifically Panahi's niece, the woman with the fishbowl, and that woman with the flowers. These people, their stories are probably the most impactful for me when it comes to this. And yes, another one is the woman with her dying husband is also impactful, but that one is very straightforward in its kind of idea of this is all she has to be able to make um, be able to live freely in a state that does not let women have property. She is doing her best to give agency to herself in this situation. And so now, and so that is, yes, it is a very, you know, kind of captivating story. But I want to talk more. I want to talk deeper about these other three that I really, really enjoyed when watching Taxi. Taxi is also a film about before we get into that, Taxi is also a film about the restrictions of filmmaking in Iran, as well as the lengths that Panahi is willing to go to make a dangerous film. And by dangerous film, I am taking from reading Lolly and Turan's Reading Dangerously. Making a dangerous film is it's really about um, how far are you willing to go to talk about what you need to talk about? What is this Panahi's to be or not to be? Is this Panahi's idea of am I going to let these rules get in my way of making my movie that I want to make, or am I going to make this movie how I want so I can show people what I want to show and understand? And that is one of the great powers of Panahi and Taxi. Because he is not a taxi driver, he is a movie director. And that is immediately noticed by, as you can see, the woman holding flowers on the poster. She's a teacher. Her and another man get into a debate about the death penalty. And or no, that is not that's the lady who hands out flowers. That's at the end. Yep. So there's a story at the start about a woman, a teacher, and a man talking about the death penalty. Very, very argumentative piece. Very argumentative story. Um, but at the end of the movie, there's this lady with flowers. She she's giving flowers out. She visits her friend, who is going on a hunger trial in prison because she is protesting. This woman who is on a hunger strike in jail in prison. That is her to be, not to be. That is her idea of body politics. She's denying Iran, the prison, the state, the sovereign state, her body to use as a tool of fear that prisons have. And yes, prisons use your body as a tool of fear and control for the populace. And so Panahi has been in prison many times, and this just for his films. And this woman said in her story that she has also been in prison, and that she recognized Panahi, and that they both understand what it means to go on a hunger strike, and that is powerful. You know, we talk the other story, the niece. I'm kind of working in backwards order, but the niece, she has to make a school assignment to where she has to make a film, but this film is full of restrictions and guidelines, much like Panahi has to follow it, or else he goes to jail. And these guidelines are very strict because that is censorship by the sovereign state, and that is not what Panahi wants to do. But for the niece to work on her school assignment, she has to follow these. She has to be obedient to the sovereign state, so that way she can get a good assignment. And it comes in when she talks to the boy with the trash bag, who picked up the money that the people at the wedding dropped. And so she gets upset, tells her to give it back, but tells him to give it back. But he tries and nothing happens, and she gets upset that she cannot use that film anymore because it goes against the guidelines. But why not? Why should she not be able? Why shouldn't she be able to use that as film? Use it. Make your dangerous film, and get in trouble. But then you would have done it. Then you would have shown what you want to show. And the final story is the two women in the fish with the fishbowl that are that have a superstition about the nature of the fish and what will happen at noon, which is why they must get a new fish at noon. And it goes to show the kind of the mental toll of the sovereign state. This idea that the gaze of the sovereign state kind of has on people, and we talked in class about this. The idea of sort of how superstition can be used as a way of coping with the sovereign state. And I chimed in that day on why I can't fully remember what my discussion was about, but why I agreed. But looking at it more now, it feels as though that the argument is not wholly encompassing of Taxi and like what it does. And so it was an interesting story. And it's an interesting kind of idea of superstition and the sovereign state and coping with the sort of imposed gaze that happens with that. I think if you want to talk about the imposed gaze, you have to talk about the entirety of Taxi and Panahi and the more kind of fortuitous ideas that are being proposed by showing what cannot be shown. Back to that painting. Why are these stories chosen? Why are these the stories that we are given to by Panahi? And why is that the the way he wants to tell his story. Why is this Panahi's to be or not to be? So that is what I have about taxi, and we're gonna move on to this outside class discussion. We had one. We did have an outside class discussion, and I feel like Dr. Mukuji is going to laugh a little about this when she sees that this is part of my presentation. But I thought it was very important and is actually very related to taxi in the sense that we had the opportunity to be outside for a class. How amazing is that? That we are able to go outside for class and talk about bathrooms. That is what we talked about outside. We talked about bathrooms, but and I'll get into more of that conversation in a second. I want to talk about, we were still under the gaze and authority of Boise State campus. That has still happened. We were still on campus. We did not leave campus. But we were not confined to a singular space on campus to have our class. How lucky is that freedom? How amazing is that freedom to be able to go anywhere for class? While, yes, anywhere kind of like with an asterisk that says like still on Boise State campus. But again, how amazing that we were able to go anywhere for class. And we this freedom of movement, this is something that I think a lot of us take for granted these days, is that we are able to travel where we want to travel. A lot of people don't have that luxury, and a lot of people don't have that right, especially nowadays. And so that's something that is deeply upsetting, and is mainly one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this in. Another thing that we talked about was bathrooms and bathroom passes imposed by teachers. I said one that was kind of crazy, is that one of my teachers made us carry around a textbook to the bathroom. That is a very heavy textbook that we had to carry to the bathroom as our hallway pass. It kind of made this idea of like, are you willing to carry this heavy book? So that way you can go to the bathroom, or will you sit in class and listen? This idea of, punishing your need to use the bathroom as a way to force you to stay in class and listen, to be under authority, to be under the gaze of the institution. That is, that's insane. There were so many other people that said that they had, crazy restrictions, like, you can't go during class, you can go in between class, but in between class is 3 minutes long. That's insane! How can you use the bathroom? How can you use the bathroom like that? And so that's why I want to bring in the outside class, because that is not a story, that is not a movie. This is, this outside class showed real discussion, real experience. And not to say that no movie or book was real experience. Panahi very much so was. But what I'm saying, and this is why I connected this after Panahi in Taxi. But this is to say that this is all stuff that we have experienced here in America. And, how much worse we could have it. That this is what we are lambasting. This is what we are, talking about and having our discussion about in terms of freedoms. Is that this is the choice that we're given. And that kind of ties back into Haidir and the Kashmir conflict and this idea of the camps, and how regulated they are in their day-to-day. That is why I want to bring up the outside class discussion. Again, right here, the idea of taxi being sort of this rebelling, this to be or not to be against the sovereign state. To film or not to film, for Panahi's sake, and Haidir and his quest to have a free Kashmir. We get into the ideas of the story of the other and the subaltern. The subaltern being so far from the other that they are not heard. The ideas of Kashmir being the subaltern. When we talk about the other as well, we have to discuss women in Algiers. Oh, I forgot to give the quote for that. I decided not to get a quote. Okay, that's fine. I just want to talk about this more on a grand scale than specifically the quote. And I'm going to paraphrase instead of a quote, just because it was kind of hard to find with the whole canvas thing going down. But we get into the idea of the other and the subaltern. Already, we've talked about the lack of female agency. Women have traditionally, because we live in patriarchal society, women are seen as the other. They are less heard of, less heard from. And women in Algiers living in their apartments is no different. This ties directly back into this painting, because that is what this book's cover is this painting. We are now going back to Aladdin and Orientalism, and now we're talking about colonial guilt. Man, I wish I had this book available because I could remember names. I know we have Fatima, who she is one of the main components of the story, because she is the subaltern. She is othered from the other because her role in society is so looked down upon that she is othered. We talk about colonial guilt, where this woman comes back to Algiers because she wants to die there, because she has such a love for the place and for her nanny that she grew up with when she lived in Algiers. Colonialism took so much away. Colonization took so much away from a lot of places, and a lot of what makes places unique and full of culture, just by saying that they are not cultured enough, not civilized enough. That Western culture is the dominant culture. And Women in Algiers shows how much of that has been taken, and why it is important that the idea of a non-singular story should be shown. Feminist literature. I'm gonna butcher it so bad, but Phil de Extrait, I think, writing from the body. It's writing from the body for feminist literature is a French idea that because patriarchy has taken over language, how can a woman write? A woman writes from her experience and from her body. That is the main point of feminist literature, and that is what is being shown by women in Algiers. Now we go back. Women in Algiers, in Aladdin, in Aladdin, female agency is now being shown. We are now showing what can be done as a female in these positions. And when we look at these grander, when we look at these stories, we can see how different, how separated they are from each other, and what is truly being shown. I think I just said a whole lot of nothing right there, so let me kind of back it up. Woman in Algiers shows us what female agency truly looks like when you have novels and movies. I'm not even gonna call it a novel. When you have writing in a movie like Aladdin and Aladdin. Women in Algiers is here to show us what female agency looks like in this kind of setting and time. And so we go into Cachet. We go into this great French film by Haneke. We go into what I've been talking about, the gaze of the sovereign state, the idea of control. Lacan, Lacan, yay. Psychoanalytical analysis. Lacan. I know a little bit about Lacan, but I know a lot about I know about the gaze. Because of our class on Cachet. And so Cachet, I want to talk about the opening scene of Cachet, where the opening credits are rolling. The camera that is being shown is not the director's camera. It is the camera set up there before we get to the opening shot of when the main character, walks out and tries to look down the alleyway for the camera they are looking at. They're looking through. That is the camera that we see in the opening shot. And as the credits come through, my idea was that these credits are Haneke's way of taking back control of his opening shot. That Haneke is not in control of his opening shot. He's not in control of his own film because someone has taken that away from him. Haneke has lost control in his own movie. And so what needs to happen? He has to put his name on it. So that way it is his now. He, like many other, I will compare Haneke to the sovereign state for a second, I know. Terrible idea. Oh. Haneke, I apologize. But, Michael Haneke, I apologize. But the idea that this is what happens when the sovereign state loses control, that they have to put their name on it. They have to stamp it for approval because then it shows that they control the situation now. It is no longer just about it isn't the movement anymore. It is now the sovereign state's movement because they have put their name on it. And that is what Cachet does. That is what the opening scene does. Is Michael Haneke is losing control, so he has to regain it. And doing so, he reinstates his gaze as the next shot of the movie. Oh. And so we go back to this idea of what is being shown by not showing it. What are we able to infer and see? Because the films are not telling us exactly what is happening. For Taxi and Cachet, what is being shown from the not showing? For Taxi, I believe that is the rules that are in place on filming within Iran, within Tehran. Making a dangerous film. And for cachet, it is this idea of being hidden, so hidden that you are forgotten. And when you are forgotten, you are nobody, not even to the people that have forgot you. And so we reach panopticism, the gaze of the sovereign state. Foucault's discipline and punish as a response to the panopticon, a form of prison. And so the swarming of disciplinary mechanisms, while on the one hand the disciplinary establishments increase, the mechanisms have a certain tendency to become deinstitutionalized, to emerge from the closed fortress in which they once functioned and to circulate in a quote-unquote free state. The massive compact disciplines are broken down into flexible methods of control, which may be transferred and adapted. I read this quote specifically from the Discipline and Punishment, the chapter titled Panopticism. I read this quote because this is what happens. This is what has happened. The idea that the sovereign state uses its gaze and mechanisms of control in a much broader sense because it has been implemented in so many ways. And there is so much that has happened. Obedience through docility. When you talk about laws, that is the obedience that we have in America. That is the docility that we have in America. Oh, man. And as such, we are, we're given this this choice of, do you obey and be docile to the sovereign state, or do you not, and do you end up in prison, where you are constantly watched, where you're constantly under the pressure of the sovereign state, where your body is not yours anymore unless you take it back for yourself. That is the ideas of the panopticon and panopticism and discipline and punishment. That you are always under the watch of the sovereign state. That is what all of these stories and this is what all this film and literature is talking about. That you're always under watch. That you must always make this to be or not to be, this conflict of, are you a docile individual, or are you willing to protest and become somebody that the sovereign state must fear and control in order to keep others docile? What is your to be or not to be in that case? What is your where am I and where am I not? And so, as a conclusion, I urge you to look beyond just the films and the texts and everything that is in front of you, and look beyond and say, where am I in this? Where am I in this state, in this sovereign state in America? What am I doing? And what am I not doing by being here? By not saying certain things, or not engaging in certain types of media. What is your how much are you under the control of the sovereign state? Because I know I am, and I understand that I am under the control of the sovereign state. And there's so much more that I can do. And to do that, I can start by reading and watching films like Haneke and Panahi, by reading literature like Hamlet, by engaging with the ideas that are so fundamental to the to being a human that we still talk about them today. So I appreciate you for watching. Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee, for having such a lovely class this semester. I am very happy that I took this class with you. Oh, yes, here's my works cited. It's just this. Yep, alright. I hope you have a good summer, Dr. Mukherjee, and I know I will. Alright, bye-bye.